Hey guys, it's Brittany. So I'm going to go through what a Materia Medica is. It is, I want to say the Bible, but that's not true. We always say the Bible is the organon. For prescription purposes, the Materia Medica is all. So in a case, you take the case, you come up with your list of symptoms that you have to have a remedy cover. You put those symptoms into a repertory. The repertory gives you a small group of remedies to go read for in the Materia Medica. And then reading in the Materia Medica is how you decide what fits your patient best. Because often you will find that even though, 3 remedies fit the patient's symptoms, technically, when you read, you're like, oh yeah, it sounds like, I remember Jamie Oskin once said it, like, it sounds like my patient is talking to me through the Materia Medica. Like, I can hear their voice. And that's what you want. And you want it to come from the Materia Medica. You don't want it to be coming from the repertory. The Materia Medica, it's a very old word. You really only hear herbalists use it these days anymore. But it was a very common thing. It was what they called, like, it would be like a pharmaceutical textbook these days. Like I've got the, it's called the CTC, the Therapeutic Compendium for Drugs. It's the same thing. Like, it's just, well, actually the CTC is not the same thing. It says, like, anxiety, and then it has all the remedies, or all the drugs for anxiety. So that would be like our repertory. But the point is that you go to a certain page, you go to the phosphorus page, and then you see all of the different symptoms that phosphorus has, and you decide whether or not it matches. Because homeopathy is always just a matching game, right? So, the first homeopathic one, well, I guess you could debate that Hahnemann wrote 2 that we still use, but he technically wrote 3. So he wrote Chronic Diseases and Materia Medica Pura. Materia Medica Pura was first, Chronic Diseases was second. So if you have a choice, try and read Chronic Diseases, because he was a little bit more thorough. He was a little bit more used to this stuff. He's a little more practiced. So some remedies he updated in Chronic Diseases that originally appeared in Materia Medica Pura. So when you have the chance, read Chronic Diseases, not Materia Medica Pura. But anyway, he also wrote a 3rd one, Fragmenta, but we don't really use it these days. Fragmenta was more to prove to allopaths that this law of similars thing was, like, legit. It wasn't really helpful for prescribing. So Materia Medica Pura and Chronic Diseases are for prescribing. He made them for practitioners. Okay? So the way he set it up, and a lot of Materia Medicas copy the basic format, though not all. You have an introduction section, so you can see that here. And then sometimes he goes on these philosophical rants. They're actually really interesting. It's a really great way to study. But then he goes through common indications for each remedy. So these are sort of the characteristic signs of the remedy, the things that he sees all the time as reasons to prescribe this particular remedy. Super helpful. Okay, and then he gets into the particulars. So it's just a list for Hahnemann. Now other Materia Medicas will have a slightly different structure. Some, will say mind, and then it's like a whole paragraph or 4 paragraphs of mind symptoms, but they still are like a list. None of them are in sentence form. I shouldn't say none. Very few are in sentence form. The fact that it's just a list makes it very dull reading. I will not lie. And very easy to, start to lose your mind. However, Hahnemann is by far the most accurate. Like, you are never going to get more accurate than Hahnemann. Hahnemann, because he is truly a secondary source. Everything else is a tertiary source or more, because everything he is citing back to after every symptom, he has these citations. These are provings that were done, or, for example, in this one, an old school source. These are all primary sources. So this is a secondary source. Everything else just takes everything and rehashes it, and so you get a lot more errors because, just the more times you copy something, the more errors you get. It's just the way the world works, unfortunately. So I highly recommend trying to read Hahnemann when you can. But I know it takes a lot of practice because it's boring as all get out. And the language is ridiculous. So, on that note, I do encourage you to try reading different Materia Medicas and seeing what makes sense to you. I found in the beginning that what was most helpful was to find one or two Materia Medicas that didn't make my eyes go funny the way Hahnemann did, and then read those first, and then read Hahnemann after, because it was like the first reading I could sort of get a sense of the remedy, I could sort of make sense of what I was reading, and then I could go read the super detailed, mind-numbing Hahnemann stuff, and it would make more sense to me. And only after doing that for a few years have I been able to sort of now, like, I can just read Hahnemann and it makes a lot more sense to me. But it took me that long to sort of get familiar with it and all that stuff. So be kind to yourself, but always keep trying. It's like introducing baby foods. The baby may not always eat the food, the baby may not always like the food, but if you just keep offering, then maybe one day they'll like their spinach. One day you'll like Hahnemann. So let me show you a different one so you can see some of the different ways to put one together. So this is phosphorus again, but this is Bunninghausen's characteristics. It's one of my favorite sort of summary Materia Medicas because I know Bunninghausen is so accurate. But it's a lot easier to read than Hahnemann. But because it's a summary Materia Medica, a lot of stuff is left out. So almost never can I really prescribe based on just reading Bunninghausen's characteristics, although now and then I'll be like, oh yeah, that's exactly the remedy. But usually I read this first and then I come back to Hahnemann. But so, you can see it's a lot shorter. So phosphorus in Hahnemann's Materia Medica, it's got like a couple thousand symptoms. Like it's like 30 pages of that list, right? In Bunninghausen characteristics, it is 2 pages. See, it ends here, okay? And the sections are much easier to find, right? Like he says mind, vertigo, head, etc. It's a lot easier to read that way. If we go back to chronic diseases for phosphorus, now you can't see it, but this is actually also separated by section. He just doesn't label the sections, which is a little part of what makes it hard to read, because it's hard to sometimes realize you're going from section to section. But let me show you the sections. So here, this is the author's preface, the Hahnemann's preface to Materia Medica Pura. He keeps largely the same idea in chronic diseases. So, order of symptoms: vertigo, confusion, deficient mental power, loss of memory, yada, 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 yada. And so you can see the whole schema here. In chronic diseases, he does change it a little bit in that he puts anxiety, restless trembling, disturbance of the disposition, affections of the mind before vertigo. So that's really the major change in chronic diseases. Okay, most Materia Medicas will follow this schema. I don't know that I've ever read one that doesn't basically follow this schema. Okay, but there's 1,000,001 Materia Medicas out there. So, best of luck. Bye.